I've lived here all my life, about 76 years. I used to teach school and I farmed, but I was never expected to see Greensburg look like a battlefield. It sounded like an old-fashioned freight trains, what they sound like, just a rumble. I came outside to see how much damage was done, and when I opened the door and the flashlight shined upwards, all I could see was plain old sky. I'll have to get some glass for the shade, but this is out of my grandparents' house. But you never want to underestimate what a tornado can or cannot do. It can do anything it wants to do.
At 9:45 p.m. on May 4th, 2007, a tornado 1.7 miles wide struck Greensburg, Kansas, with winds of 205 miles per hour. For the next 5 minutes, the monster scoured the town to the ground. When it passed, 95% of Greensburg's structures were destroyed or heavily damaged. 12 people were dead. 1,400 residents were homeless. This was the first EF5 rating on the newly implemented enhanced Fujita scale, and it became something far more complex than a tornado story. It became a laboratory for disaster recovery, a bold experiment in sustainable development, and a cautionary tale about what happens when a small American town tries to rebuild itself for a future that may never arrive. The tornado that hit Greensburg did not touch down without warning. This was a storm meteorologists had been watching all day. The morning of May 4th began with weather balloons revealing dangerous atmospheric conditions across the Central Plains. A temperature inversion acted like a lid on a pressure cooker, holding back storm development while energy built beneath the surface. By afternoon, temperatures climbed into the mid to high 80s as the atmosphere loaded the gun. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk days in advance, with a 15% hatched tornado probability indicating a 10% or greater chance of violent tornadoes. The significant tornado parameter reached 7. Anything above 1 suggests tornadic conditions are possible. 7 was extraordinary. Mixed layer Cape values hit 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram, with some sources reporting peaks as high as 5,500. Combined with extreme wind shear throughout the atmosphere, conditions were ripe for something catastrophic. At 6:15 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued Tornado Watch 227, designated as a particularly dangerous situation. This language is reserved for the most extreme tornado threats. The watch text warned that strengthening ascent and wind fields associated with an approaching upper trough might enhance tornado potential after dark. At 7 p.m., soundings showed the cap had completely eroded. The atmosphere was uncapped and explosively unstable. Storm initiation began, and a supercell slowly organized, moving northeast through Oklahoma into Kansas. What forecasters could not know was that this particular storm would produce tornadoes for approximately 8 hours, spawning 22 tornadoes in total, including the monster that would erase Greensburg from the map. The National Weather Service in Dodge City issued the first tornado warning at 8:13 p.m. By 8:30, the supercell entered a cyclic phase, producing multiple short-lived tornadoes. At 8:39, mobile Doppler radar detected a maximum of 4 simultaneous tornadoes on the ground at varying stages of development. Some rotated cyclonically, counterclockwise, while at least 2 were anticyclonic satellite tornadoes spinning the opposite direction. Then, at 9:03 p.m., the main Greensburg tornado touched down. The cyclic phase ended. This tornado would not dissipate quickly. Storm chasers positioned southwest of Greensburg watched it organize into a massive wedge, a tornado wider than it was tall. By 9:25, radar detected extreme velocity values, 80 knots of gate-to-gate wind shear. The tornado was reported at over half a mile in diameter and growing. At 9:41 p.m., the National Weather Service in Dodge City issued a tornado emergency for Greensburg, the rarest and most urgent tornado warning, reserved for situations where a violent tornado is bearing down on a populated area. 4 minutes later, the tornado entered the south side of town. Greensburg is 1.5 miles across at its widest point. The tornado was wider than the entire city. Scott Reinicke, a 45-year-old auto repair shop owner, had experienced something unusual that afternoon. Despite thunderstorms being common during Kansas Springs, he felt a premonition he had never felt before. He put on work boots, collected flashlights, gathered documents and supplies, and cleared Christmas ornaments and old toys from under his basement stairs, which were bolted to the foundation, the safest spot in his home. When the tornado hit, he later recalled, the pressure change was so huge, it was as though he was instantly taken 100 feet down under the sea. Anita Hull, a fifth-generation Greensburg resident, was home with her 3 children when she heard wind screaming through windows. It sounded like a high-pitched woman's shriek. As tornado sirens wailed, she and the kids crawled into a small closet underneath the basement stairs of their rental house. Her husband Rick had remained upstairs, transfixed by the incoming storm. But when the windows exploded and he saw a neighbor's 6-horse trailer get lofted into the air and hurtled toward their house, he rushed downstairs. The walls and foundation shook violently. Dirt rained down on them from the floorboards as the monster roared overhead. Pastor Jeff Blackburn of Greensburg Mennonite Church huddled in a basement bathroom with his wife and his 17-year-old daughter Cassie. Cassie remembered feeling water on her back. Her father prayed quietly. The air pressure dropped severely. When they emerged, there was no laundry room. There was no floor. The stairs just walked up to nothing. Blackburn later said it did not sound like a freight train. The best way he could describe it was this: drive down the highway at 205 miles per hour, windows down, and stick your head out the window. You will get the same sound. City Administrator Steve Hewitt, 34 years old, went to his basement and crouched under the stairs. He held his son, his wife held the dog, and they rode it out. When he emerged and walked up the stairs, he saw sky. He thought the tornado had knocked the back door off. Then he realized there was no house left. There were no houses next door, to the left or to the right. His home was destroyed, but his family survived. Brad Stauner was on the road when hail shattered his windshield. He pulled into a gas station where employees urged everyone to take refuge in the walk-in cooler. That decision saved their lives. The building was obliterated around them, but the insulated cooler's structural integrity held. Judy and Steve Kirk survived by hiding under a daybed in a space friends later could not believe they fit. Judy remembered friends saying, "There is not room for you two. How did you get under this daybed?" She remembered replying that they were very close and highly motivated. The 26-minute advance warning worked. Residents took it seriously. Yet 12 people still died. The victims included Robert Tim Buckman, Richard Fry, Claude Hopkins, Larry Hoskins, Evelyn Kelly, David Lyon, Max McComb, Colleen Panzer, Ron Rediger, Harold Schmidt, Sarah Tackett, and Beverly Volz. Some were in basements when killed. The tornado's violence simply overwhelmed their shelter. First responders initially requested 3 refrigerated trucks, expecting hundreds of fatalities. The actual toll of 12 deaths in a town 95% destroyed stands as testament to the warning system's success and its limitations. At sunrise on May 5th, survivors emerged to incomprehensible devastation. State Representative Dennis McKinney, who had hidden in his basement with his daughter as the tornado destroyed his house, spent the early morning hours helping search homes for survivors. The inspections did not take that long, he noted grimly, because in the western part of town, there were not many homes left to inspect. Scott Reinicke described emerging into darkness to see rubble illuminated only by flashes of lightning. Trees were completely debarked, stripped clean of bark, looking like bleached bones. Of 634 trees surveyed in the damage assessment, 244 were debarked with only trunk stubs remaining. Downtown Greensburg was unrecognizable. The yellow brick road of Main Street, lined with turn-of-the-century commercial buildings, existed only as rubble and scattered bricks. Every business between 20th and 26th Streets was heavily damaged or destroyed. The local bank stood as a pile of debris surrounding an intact concrete vault, a safe protecting money no one could spend because there were no businesses to buy from. Greensburg High School sustained high-end EF5 damage. The three-story main building had triple-thick masonry walls, but the unreinforced masonry collapsed, toppling westward. All three schools in town were destroyed or heavily damaged. All 9 churches lost their steeples. Most were completely destroyed. The Catholic Church was leveled, though its pews somehow survived. Greensburg City Hall was destroyed. The water tower above the Big Well toppled and smashed, its estimated 55,000 gallons flooding the area. But the 109-foot deep hand dug well itself, dug in 1887 to supply water for steam locomotives, survived intact, as did the 1,000-pound meteorite it had housed, which was found in the rubble days later. By dawn on May 5th, Greensburg was declared unsafe and fully evacuated. A mandatory evacuation order sent 1,400 residents scattering to neighboring towns. The Kansas National Guard arrived around 2:30 a.m., eventually deploying nearly 500 soldiers and airmen. A dusk to dawn curfew was implemented. Within days, 7 suspects were arrested for looting, including 4 soldiers from Fort Riley who had gone to Greensburg on their own. 2 looters were arrested wearing fake Red Cross jackets. President George W. Bush declared a major disaster for Kansas on May 6th, just 2 days after the tornado. Federal assistance began flowing immediately. Over $100 million in federal assistance would eventually be provided. On May 9th, 5 days after the tornado, President Bush visited. At Bay Street, he said there is a lot of destruction. Fortunately, a lot of folks had basements here in this part of the world and lived to see another day. Unfortunately, too many died. I am struck by the strength of the character of the people who live here in the plains. Debris removal began immediately. Over the following months, approximately 800,000 cubic yards of tornado-related debris would be removed, 75,000 to 80,000 truckloads, nearly 500,000 pounds per resident. 2 landfills were filled. Most debris was burned. Streets were cleared by heavy equipment within 3 days, but the sorting, removal, and disposal continued through October 2007 and into April 2008. Within days of the tornado, on May 11, 2007, exactly 1 week after the disaster, over 500 people gathered under a FEMA tent to discuss Greensburg's future. The first critical question was existential. Should we rebuild it all, or should people relocate? The precedent for small-town disappearance was strong. After similar disasters, many communities never recovered their populations. Greensburg's population had been declining for generations, like many rural Kansas towns, facing automation of farming, consolidation, and youth outmigration. Rebuilding exactly what existed before meant rebuilding a dying town. City Manager Steve Hewitt and City Council President John Jansen met in the City Hall parking lot within days. Hewitt captured the moment when he said, "Every problem, every issue this town has ever had, this is our chance to make it right. We cannot screw this up." Then came the pivot that would define Greensburg's legacy. Governor Kathleen Sebelius visited, and her office representative suggested that, since it is Greensburg, you are going to build back green. The idea resonated. Within months, a vision crystallized. Greensburg would become the greenest town in America. By December 2007, the City Council adopted a resolution requiring all municipally owned buildings over 4,000 square feet to achieve LEED Platinum certification, making Greensburg the first city in the nation to mandate this standard. Not LEED Gold, not LEED Silver. Platinum, the highest certification. This was 2007, before green building was mainstream, in a conservative farming community in rural Kansas. The decision seemed counterintuitive, adding cost and complexity to an already overwhelming rebuilding challenge. But several factors aligned. The town was starting with a blank slate. Substantial federal, state, and private funding was available. Community leaders framed sustainability not as liberal environmentalism, but as conservative values, conservation, self-sufficiency, and stewardship. Most importantly, differentiation offered survival. Rural Kansas towns were dying. Greensburg needed something to attract investment, attention, and residents. Green Building provided that hook. A 12-week intensive community engagement process followed. Meetings drew hundreds of residents who discussed the town's future. Residents who had evacuated to neighboring towns drove back for weekly meetings. Implementation came quickly. In March 2009, the Greensburg wind farm went operational. 10 wind turbines, totaling 12.5 megawatts of capacity, supply 100% of the city's municipal electricity, making Greensburg one of a handful of United States cities powered entirely by renewables. Buildings began rising that would become case studies. The 547 Arts Center opened June 16, 2008, less than 14 months after the tornado, as the first LEED Platinum building in Kansas. Named for the tornado date, May 4, 2007, it achieved 70% energy cost savings. Kiowa County Memorial Hospital reopened in March 2010 as the first LEED Platinum critical access hospital in the United States. It achieved carbon neutral status in 2011, the first United States hospital to do so, and became the first hospital to use captured rainwater to flush toilets. The new K-12 school for USD 422 opened in 2010, LEED Platinum certified, achieving 60% greater energy efficiency than code requirements. The wrestling room was designed as a storm shelter for students and faculty, a lesson learned in blood. Greensburg City Hall was rebuilt using reclaimed brick from tornado debris and became the first city hall in America to achieve LEED Platinum certification. By 2012, a National Renewable Energy Laboratory report documented that 13 smart buildings saved a combined $200,000 per year in utility costs. The school achieved 72% energy savings versus typical buildings, the hospital 59%, and homes averaged 40% less energy consumption. In the first 10 years, Greensburg's electricity rates rose only once, from 12 cents to 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Recognition poured in. Leonardo DiCaprio Executive produced a documentary series that aired from June 2008 through May 2010, bringing international attention. Media called Greensburg the greenest city in America. Tourists came from Europe. Greensburg achieved the highest concentration of LEED-certified buildings per capita in the world. Yet beneath this green veneer, a harsh reality was taking shape. By the 2010 census, Greensburg's population was 777, almost exactly half the 1,500 residents before the tornado. By 2020, it had declined further to 740. As of 2023 estimates, the population sits around 700, a loss of nearly 55%. The town successfully became the greenest in America, but it failed to bring people home. The core problem was housing affordability. Before the tornado, homes in Greensburg were cheap, $46,500 on average. Building a new 1,300 square foot home to even basic standards cost approximately $120,000. Building to higher efficiency standards added upfront costs. While the new homes saved 40% on energy bills long term, most displaced families could not afford the construction costs. Rental rates before the tornado of $335 per month were projected to rise to $750 for new units. Surrounding towns had old, cheap housing inventory that cost far less than building new in Greensburg. Insurance gaps compounded the problem. Most homeowners had insurance, but the vast majority were underinsured. Average insurance estimates around $50,000 fell $70,000 to $100,000 short of actual rebuilding costs. Total insured damage from the Greensburg tornado reached $153 million against total damages of $250 million, a gap of $97 million. 1 year after the tornado, 140 families were still living in FEMA trailers, haggling with insurance companies. One resident told reporters that they had replacement cost coverage, but it was not enough to rebuild. The town created FEMAville, a cluster of 250 temporary mobile homes where about 400 to 500 people lived. Residents paid only utilities for the first 18 months. But FEMA trailers were meant to be temporary. As the trailers emptied, many residents did not move back into Greensburg. They moved to Pratt, to Dodge City, to Wichita. They found jobs and put down roots elsewhere. A cyclical problem emerged. No affordable housing meant young families could not move to Greensburg. No young families meant no demand for schools and services. No demand meant businesses did not return. No businesses meant no jobs. No jobs meant no reason to build housing. By 2014, Daniel Wallach, co-founder of Greensburg Greentown, expressed frustration to reporters. Quite remarkable, but frankly, since that first year, not much has happened. The 72-acre industrial park sat mostly empty 15 years after the tornado. Of 110 businesses before the tornado, only 66 indicated plans to rebuild. At the Bar H Tavern, the town's only bar, which had briefly served as a makeshift morgue, some residents grumbled that the Green Initiative was holding the town back. They felt cut out of the process and saw it as a rich outsider's utopian vision while they struggled to afford living in their own rebuilt town. School enrollment told the story. Before the tornado, approximately 300 students attended Greensburg schools. As of recent reports, Kiowa County Schools serves 280 students through 12th grade, but draws from the entire county, not just Greensburg. While the building is a marvel, the population to fill it never materialized. The graduation rate languishes at 55%, and the district offers no honors or AP courses. The school performs below state averages, 37% proficient in math, 32% in reading. By 2017, the town's median age was 50.4 years, compared to 38.8 nationally. Fully 25% of residents were over 65. Only 24% were under age 18. These demographics suggested an aging, shrinking community struggling to attract and retain young families. Mayor Bob Dixon later said he wanted to get past being known as a tornado town. The identity had become complicated. International recognition for sustainability was a point of pride, but the population numbers were a point of pain. While the warning system succeeded in minimizing deaths, it could not prevent long-term psychological trauma. Survivor accounts reveal lasting impacts. Stacy Barnes, city administrator who arrived shortly after the tornado, confirmed that loud noise, like a freight train, is a lasting memory for a lot of people. Survivors report increased fear when storms approach. Cassie Gamble, who was 17 during the tornado, told reporters in 2022 that anytime you see the devastation on TV of someone else going through it, it brings everything else right back up. Anniversary dates trigger visible distress. Storm sirens, windy days, and the approach of May 4th each year cause emotional responses in survivors. Mental health services were available, but rural stigma around mental health care likely minimized help seeking. Research on other tornado-affected communities shows mental health needs typically increase 5 to 7 years post-disaster. Whether similar patterns occurred in Greensburg is unknown. No systematic tracking was published. The anniversaries became rituals of remembrance and assessment. At the one-year anniversary on May 4th, 2008, President George W. Bush returned to deliver the high school graduation commencement speech. Bush told the graduates, "When the class of 2008 walks across the stage today, you will send a powerful message to our nation. Greensburg, Kansas is back, and its best days are ahead." The 10-year anniversary on May 4th, 2017, featured extensive commemorations. At exactly 9:45 p.m., the moment the tornado struck, a minute of silence was observed. Dove balloons were released for each fatality. But the tone had shifted from triumph to reckoning. Residents acknowledged, "I think there were hopes out there. We would have 2,500 people." The population at 850 to 900 represented progress from the immediate post-tornado nadir, but fell far short of pre-tornado levels, let alone growth projections. Visible reminders remained: dead trees, vacant lots, foundations where homes once stood. By 2025, nearly 18 years after the tornado, Greensburg stands as both inspiration and a cautionary tale. It is unquestionably a success in sustainable development. The most LEED buildings per capita in the world, 100% renewable municipal electricity, $200,000 in annual energy savings, carbon neutral hospital, innovations replicated globally. The community engagement process, the federal, state, and local coordination, and the integration of sustainability from the onset became models studied internationally. Yet the population remains around 700, roughly half of pre-tornado levels, and continues declining. The demographic profile suggests an aging community struggling to sustain itself. The industrial park sits mostly empty. Young people leave for college and do not return. The school serves students across the entire county with below-average outcomes, despite exceptional facilities. Affordable housing remains scarce. The question Greensburg forces us to confront is complex. Did the focus on green rebuilding help or hinder recovery? Proponents argue it provided differentiation, attracted investment and attention, created energy savings, and positioned the town for a sustainable future. Critics argue it added costs and complexity, created an affordability crisis, attracted the wrong kind of attention, and failed to address the fundamental economic challenges facing rural Kansas. Both are partially correct. The green rebuilding created genuine achievements and innovations of lasting value. The energy savings are real. The buildings are exceptional. The international recognition brought opportunities and funding that would never have materialized otherwise. Federal assistance exceeded $100 million, far more than a typical small-town disaster would receive. Yet the core challenge of rural depopulation was not addressed by green building. A town can be the greenest in America and still lose population if there are no jobs, no affordable housing, and no economic base. As Mayor Matt Christensen observed, Greensburg's greatest challenges now are not at all related to the storm. It is related to the economic challenges that small towns face all over the country. The insurance gaps, the rebuilding costs, and the delays in construction pushed people to neighboring towns where housing was cheap and available. By the time Greensburg had new homes, many displaced families had already established new lives elsewhere. The window for return was narrow, and the complexity of green rebuilding, while creating long-term value, may have narrowed it further. Superintendent Darren Hedrick offered perspective in 2014, 7 years after the tornado. "We are 7 years old right now. What do we need? We need time. You grow communities a family at a time." By that logic, at 18 years old, Greensburg is approaching adulthood. The achievements are substantial. The population has stabilized, albeit at half pre-tornado levels. Key infrastructure is not just rebuilt, but superior to what existed before. Energy resilience positions the town well for climate change and for energy price volatility. But the population trajectory remains downward, not upward. The 2020 census showed 740 residents. 2023 estimates show 700. If the trend continues, Greensburg could fall below 700 within a few years. The psychological toll persists. 17 years later, survivors experience trauma responses to storms and sirens. Anniversary commemorations bring grief to the surface. The 12 lives lost are honored each May 4th, but the broader community trauma remains incompletely addressed. The hidden toll may be far higher than the visible toll. The Greensburg story is not simple. It cannot be told as pure triumph or pure tragedy. It is both simultaneously, and the tension between those narratives is where the truth lives. The meteorology was extraordinary. The warning system worked almost perfectly, yet 12 people died, demonstrating both the success of modern meteorology and the limits of even excellent warnings. The rebuilding decision was bold and consequential. The hidden consequences reveal the deeper story. The population that never returned, the affordable housing crisis, the aging demographics, the insurance gaps, the persistent psychological trauma, the tension between national recognition and local frustration. Greensburg's influence extends far beyond its 700 residents. After tornadoes struck Parkersburg, Joplin, Moore, Nashville, Mayfield, and Greenfield, officials from all these communities called Greensburg for advice. The town became an international case study taught in disaster resilience courses. Building code changes, insurance policy modifications, storm shelter requirements, FEMA recovery programs, and the integration of sustainability into disaster recovery, Greensburg's influence is substantial. The power of the Greensburg story is its honesty. It shows that even with excellent warnings, people die. Even with $100 million in federal aid, population can decline. Even with sustainable building practices and international recognition, economic challenges persist. Even with strong community bonds, trauma lasts. Even with bold vision and determination, some problems resist solution. Yet it also shows what is possible. A town can be almost completely destroyed and rebuild itself as something new. Innovation can emerge from catastrophe. Community engagement can shape recovery. Sustainable development can be achieved. A town of 700 people can influence disaster response practices globally. Survivors can persist, adapt, and find meaning in helping others. Greensburg is the story of American resilience, tested to its limits, and the complicated, incomplete, ongoing answer to whether resilience is enough.